Okay, so before we do anything, just in case some of you want to follow along with the directions that we've posted on the website, I'm going to show you where you can access those. So we're going to just open up Internet Explorer, and you want to go to www.aimsupport.net. That's going to take you to our main web page, and you'll see on the very front there is this large section for ICD-10 in IMS and Medisoft. IMS is a different software that we sell. So we're posting these in the same spot. And what you want to do is come to this area that says these files are available from the downloads menu. And you click on that downloads link here. It's going to take you to our ICD-10 guides, and you just click View Files. And the very first listing is going to be the Medisoft ICD10 utilities. So you can click on this link here, or you can click Download Now. That's going to download a PDF that has the instructions on everything that we're about to cover. And you'll see nice pictures, all that good stuff. And it's going to go pretty much in the order that we're about to cover it as well. So if you want to follow along, go ahead and go to that website and download it from that location, and you can follow along with us here. And again, that is aimsupport.net. You're going to click on View Files under the ICD-10 section, and then click on Download to view that. And we're also going to place the webinar in the same location. Hopefully we will have it up by tomorrow, if not the day after. So we're going to open up our Medisoft, and this is a nice tutorial data set with a whole lot of fake patients. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through and kind of explain a couple of new fields that you may or may not have already noticed that are included in Medisoft version 19 and version 20. And these will make a little bit more sense when we get to the utilities and you can see how they're actually used. So the first one we're going to take a look at is under the insurance carrier. If you edit any insurance now, and you go to options and codes here, you'll see there's now a section where you can dictate whether this insurance carrier accepts ICD-9 or ICD-10 codes. Because they are anticipating that not all carriers will be ready by the October 1st deadline, hopefully it will be mainly just the smaller insurance carriers. But if an insurance carrier lets you know that they are not ICD-10 compatible, you can always edit that insurance and change it from ICD-10 back to ICD-9. Now, if you choose ICD-10 here, it's going to ask us when we want that effective date to go into effect. So that's going to be 10/1/2015, and this is referring to the date of service. So any date of service prior to this, it will automatically send ICD-9 codes instead, and any date of service after 10/1, it will start sending the ICD-10 codes. So having said that, Medisoft didn't want you to have to edit each and every insurance carrier that you had in your system to set these values, so they gave us a tool to do that for us. So we're going to go ahead and cancel here and start with our first utility. All of these utilities, well, both of the utilities that you're going to need to run are listed under Tools and Services here. And you're going to want to run these for each practice. So if you're a billing service and you have multiple practices, you want to go through and run this once on each practice, both of these utilities at the top here. Now, before we start that, there is one thing that I'd like you all to check before you run the utilities, and that is we want to make sure that our ICD-10 fields under our diagnosis are blank. So if you go to List and Diagnosis, real quick way to check if they're blank, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Yeah, we have our code 1 or code field, Then we have the ICD-9 code and the ICD-10 code. Now, what we want to make sure of is, because one of these utilities is going to go through every single diagnosis here, and anyone that has a blank ICD-10 field, it's going to try to match and add an ICD-10 code. So what we've seen in the past is a lot of the occasions we'll see somebody has copied the ICD-9 into the ICD-10 field. So if you run into a case where you come into this screen and you remove the check from display ICD-9 codes, if it's not blank here, especially if there are a lot of them, give me a call. Because what I'll need to do, it's a very quick fix, but we need to clear out those ICD-10 codes before you run the ICD-10 utility. And it takes about a minute and a half for me to run a utility on that that'll clear that out for you. But you really want to do it before you run the utilities. Otherwise, when you're done, it's going to be more confusing for you to try to find the right code. So the way you check for that, again, is you go to List and Diagnoses here, and then you just want to remove the check mark from Display ICD-9 codes, and if you see it blank, you're good to go. If not, give me a call and we'll get it sorted out for you. Okay, so now we're ready to actually run our utilities. So I'm going to go to Tools and Services here. And the first thing we're going to do is set ICD version. Now, this is the utility that allows you to go through and set which insurance carriers you want to accept ICD-10 and on what date. So when we pull it up here, this is a tutorial data set, so it only has a few carriers. Chances are your insurance lists are much larger. But what you want to do on this screen is click on Code Set, and you can do this today. It's not going to bother you at all to go ahead and have this done prior to October 1st, and that goes the same with the other utility. You can, in fact, I would recommend running both of these and starting to use your ICD-10 codes today so that you get familiarized with your most common codes. But we're going to come over here and choose ICD-10. And then I want to check the effective date here, and I want to make that 10/1 of 2015. Then I would come down to the bottom and click Select All so that it selects all my insurance carriers, and just click Update Selected. You'll see that goes through and sets them all to start accepting or sending out ICD-10 codes on dates of service 10/1 and after. And this will make a little more sense once we see it in action here. But that's all you have to do on this screen, and you're done. So we click Close here. We're going to go back to Tools and Services, and this is the really nice utility. This Create ICD-10 Mappings is going to go through your entire diagnosis list, and it uses the general equivalency mappings by Medicare or CMS to suggest equivalent codes. So we're just going to click on Create ICD-10 Mappings. On this first screen, it's going to give you the instructions. You're welcome to read those. But since I'm on the phone right now, we're going to go ahead and just skip that and go to our one-to-one mappings. This tab will show you every code that has a one-to-one map to an ICD-10 code. So it's going to pull in your code from your diagnosis list, and it's going to suggest an ICD-10 code. To add these codes, now I guess I should make the distinction. It's not going to go through your current codes and append them and add something to that ICD-10 field. It's going to create a new code with the ICD-10 code and the ICD-9 code in their respective places, which will make a little bit more sense in a moment as well. But when you get to this screen, it's going to pre-populate any code that doesn't already have an ICD-10 match, and we just choose Select All, and you'll see it fill in that new code here. That's going to be your ICD-10, and we just choose the button that says Create Selected Codes. When it's done, if you've mapped all of your one-to-one matches, you'll see a blank screen here. Now, if at any point you go in after this and you create a new diagnosis code, and you know the ICD-9 code, but you don't know the ICD-10 code, you can come back to this screen, and as long as you leave that ICD-10 field blank when you're setting up the code, it'll show up here for you to map. So it's only going to show you codes that haven't been mapped before. So those are our one-to-one mappings. This other mappings, this would be any ICD-9 code that has multiple ICD-10 codes that it relates to, because ICD-10 is a lot more specific. Now, if you try to click select all here, it's only going to select the one you have selected, and it will select all of the matches down here at the bottom. So to get around that, what I do is I select my first code, and then I just use my space key and my down arrow to add, because some of you are going to have a lot more, depending on your specialties and your code sets. You'll have a lot more than just 15 or 20 codes here in this window. So what I do is I select the first one and use my space key to check and my down key to select the next one. And we're just going through and making sure that everything is selected here. And I just click Create Selected Codes. If everything is done correctly, then at the end of that success message, you'll see a blank screen. That lets you know that you have now added all of your mapped ICD-10 codes, and you're ready to actually use them. So we want to close out of this screen, and we're going to go to our test patient here, and I'll show you how it all comes into play. Okay, so if you enter the diagnosis on the charge line, what you would do in this instance, we're going to create a new diagnosis or a new charge. And of course, your procedure codes aren't going to change. But when I get to the diagnosis field, instead of just typing in my ICD-9 code, what you want to do is either right-click, if you're a mouse person, and choose Search Diagnosis, or click your F6 key, and that will pull up your diagnosis list. Either one will allow you to search for your diagnosis. Okay, and by default, when this list opens, you're going to see all the previous codes that you had in the system. So the way that I recommend setting up this screen, because you don't want to use any of these old codes that don't have something in ICD-10. So I'm going to remove the check from Display ICD-9 codes so that it only displays my ICD-10 ones, but I'm going to change the search from code to ICD-9. You can also search by ICD-9 description if you're more familiar with the description. So on this one, we're going to search by the ICD-9 code that we're familiar with, and that'll give us the suggestions on which ICD-10 codes to use. Now, because I talk too much before I do something, I had forgotten the code that we were looking for, but that is going to be 847.2. So we're just going to type that in here, and it will give us our suggestion on the ICD-10 equivalent. And what you'll see normally is your ICD-10 description is going to be a lot longer than your ICD-9 in most cases. And then I just double click on that code, and it fills it in for me here. So I'm going to do the same thing with this 346.9. Maybe I won't. Well, it doesn't have a mapped code for that one. Okay, we'll choose this one instead. Okay, And what it's going to do is, until dates of service of 10.1, it's going to send out whatever's in the actual ICD-9 area here. And in the ICD-10 code area, that's not going to go anywhere until the date of service is changed. So to illustrate this, we're just going to go ahead and create a claim here. And we'll do it on the one that's with form. That way it's easy to see. Okay. So here's our claim. Actually, that's an old date of service. Here's the one that we actually created today. And you'll see that it has the ICD-9 codes, even though the ICD-10 code is on the actual charge line. So if we close out of that, and I'm going to force it to create another claim. Okay. And we're going to change the date of service this time to 10.1. Save here. And we'll print the claim again. And because the claim is after 10.1, it will now send only the ICD-10 codes. And again, that's all based on that date that's entered in the insurance carrier. So if you do have one that you need to change, you can simply go into the insurance carrier on that Options and Codes tab and either extend the date if they tell you when they'll be able to accept ICD-10, or you can change it back to ICD-9 for that specific carrier. Now, if you try to use a code after that time period that doesn't have something in the ICD-10 field, you'll see it highlights it red. And that lets you know this carrier is set to only allow ICD-10 codes, but I've got an ICD-9 that doesn't have a mapping. In that instance, you'll want to search for that code and just put in the ICD-10 version of it instead. There must be something wrong with my tutorial data set. I've been using the same one to do these, and I don't think it mapped all the codes like it was supposed to. 75.0. Nope. Okay, so if you run across one that's not mapped, let me know. This is most likely because I go in each time and I have to delete all the ICD-10 information after I do a training and then add it back during the training, and I think something's just kind of confused it here because that's two codes we found that aren't mapped. But if you do try to use one that doesn't have a mapping, it is going to highlight it red. If you continue on and save that, it's going to prompt you that the diagnosis code set mapped for your primary insurance is missing the following codes. So that's letting you know that it doesn't have an ICD-10 map to it. If you choose to go even further than this and you choose you want to save it and then create your claim, it's not going to let you actually print out the claim. It's going to tell you there are no claims to be printed using the filters specified. The reason for that is when you create a claim that has the wrong diagnosis on it as a safety guard, when the claim is created here, it automatically puts the status as DX error to let you know that there is a diagnosis on this that doesn't fit the requirements for that insurance carrier. So you would actually come to the transaction tab and see the problematic diagnosis here highlighted in red, and then go back and correct that. if we click on our carrier one, you can always override it by marking it ready to send and sending it out anyway. But by default, if the diagnosis does not meet the criteria from the insurance, it's going to create with DX error as the status. So those are just a few safety guards to keep you from accidentally sending the wrong code set to the wrong insurance carrier. If you add your diagnosis from the case, it works very similarly. You're going to edit the case and go to your diagnosis tab, but rather than click F6, you just click the little search icon here, the little magnifying glass, and that's going to pull up that ICD-9 list. And each user, once you set this, how you want it to display your diagnosis list, you'll see it saved for me. So it should save that when you select that, so you only have to tell it once that you want to display only ICD-10 codes, but search by ICD-9. And then the rest is exactly the same. You just go in, see, here is that code I was looking for a moment ago, 034.0. So there was something I was doing that wasn't pulling up that code. But if we go here, works the same way. You pick your code, and it's going to only send out the ICD-9 version of that code until dates of service of 10/1. So you can start using these codes today. It allows you to get familiar with them. And also, you have a report. If you go to Reports and Medisoft Reports Professional, that will rank your most used diagnoses. So if you go to your Plus pack on the report screen, you'll see there's 2 reports labeled Diagnosis Ranking. So if you use the Diagnosis tab in the case, you want to do it by case. If you assign the diagnosis on the actual individual charge lines, you want to use the one that says charge count. And if you run this, it's going to ask you a date of service range. I'm just going to leave it blank because this is tutorial, so I'm not quite sure if we have recent dates of service. And just click OK, and it's going to rank your diagnoses from most used. So that gives you an idea. You can actually print out this report, go through your diagnosis list, and kind of jot down their ICD-10 equivalents. If you're wanting to redo your super bill or things like that, you can just print this out and then go through your diagnosis list and match these up with their ICD-10 codes, and then make changes to your super bills. And again, I got to that by going to Reports. Mine says Medisoft Reports Professional at the bottom. Yours may say Medisoft Reports. Either one will have that same report. And it's listed under the Plus Pack folder labeled Diagnosis Ranking. So those are available to you as well. I believe that is the entirety of what I have for you at the moment. So right now I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we are going to have some question and answers. So bear with me one moment here.